not in the distant stars, nor on sacred peaks, nor in mystical symbols found in ancient temples. The greatest force in the universe isn't located anywhere outside of you. It resides in every cell, every stream of thought, every breath you unconsciously pass through. If your life feels limited, depleted, or stagnant, it does not mean the divine power has rejected you. It simply means you have forgotten it. And that truth alone is enough to alter your entire destiny. Every morning when you open your eyes, you're not merely waking up in a physical body. You're awakening alongside an energy field, one that holds the same light that gave birth to galaxies. What you call consciousness is not just a random string of thoughts. It is the direct channel of infinite creative power, and you can use it to reorganize your entire life. But only if you pause and admit, I've lived too long in a state of forgetting who I truly am. This forgetfulness is not a personal flaw. It's the natural outcome of a culture programmed to seek power externally. You were taught that value lies in reputation, in job titles, in accumulated wealth. You were encouraged to chase, to compete, to prove yourself. But no one told you that even when you have nothing in your hands, you still carry within you the power to create everything. And because no one reminded you of that, you forgot. Then you began to live like an ordinary person, even though your true nature is extraordinary. The greatest tragedy is not that you are weak, it's that you don't remember how powerful you are. The truth is, every human being is born carrying a seed of power. That seed does not discriminate based on background, education, or past. It only requires one condition to awaken: awareness. But you cannot become aware of anything if you keep defining yourself by your limitations. I'm not good enough. I don't have opportunities. I'm not as lucky as others. Every time you affirm such a belief, you're closing the door to your true power. No power falls from the sky. Everything you desire, success, peace, love, healing, must be generated from within before it can manifest outwardly. Those who have never experienced this might say it's a beautiful but unrealistic theory. But reality doesn't care whether you believe or not. It simply follows immutable laws. And one of the most important laws is this: whatever you hold persistently in your consciousness, whether good or bad, will tend to take form in your life. So why do so many people live in poverty, illness, and suffering if they don't want those things? Because they don't realize they are sustaining those experiences through their thoughts every single day. Limitation isn't created by circumstance. It's created by agreement with that circumstance in the mind. The worries of, I won't make it through the month, nobody understands me, life is against me. These aren't harmless emotions. They are silent commands, repeated so often and believed so deeply that the universe is forced to obey. But when you begin to pause, listen, and accept a simple truth, creative power doesn't belong to someone else, it lies within me, everything begins to shift. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You become a co-creator with the intelligence of the universe. You no longer pray in desperation, but speak with a conviction that your words carry the power to bend reality. This is not about positive thinking or a language trick. This is a profound understanding of the relationship between consciousness and form, between belief and result, between presence and miracle. And this is exactly what spiritual masters throughout the ages have pointed to in many ways, many languages, but all with the same core message: look within. The outer world is not your enemy, but it will always be a mirror. If you look at it with eyes of scarcity, it will reflect lack. If you look with eyes of gratitude and abundance, it will multiply prosperity. The mirror does not lie. It simply reflects honestly what you're broadcasting from within. You don't need to climb a mountain, seek a guru, or wait for a dramatic event to feel transformation. You only need to begin with one sincere question: what am I using my power to create every day? And the answer may startle you. You may discover that most of the time you've been using that sacred power to recreate anxiety, sustain suffering, and repeat old scripts. But that discovery is not frightening. On the contrary, it's the doorway to true freedom. Because if you once unconsciously created a limited reality, Then you can, through awareness, create an entirely new one. Now is the time to withdraw your power from every false definition of yourself. You are no longer not enough, trying hard, or not ready. You are the conduit of divine intelligence. You are the center of an infinite flow of power waiting to be recognized, unblocked, and utilized. That power never left you. It's only been waiting for you to call it by its true name, and that name is none other than I am. Not I am a victim, I am weak, or I am someone without chances, but I am the source of every experience I create. From this very moment, if you begin to live with that awareness, your world will no longer operate the way it used to. The things you once thought were impossible will begin to soften. The limitations you once accepted as fate will start to vanish like mist in the sunlight, because you're no longer reacting to reality, you're actively designing it. You don't need to control the entire world. You only need to master one thing, your own consciousness. And from there, everything else will change, quietly, without drama, but profoundly, steadily, and irreversibly. Because when you truly realize the power of the universe never abandoned you, it's always been there in every thought, every decision, every seemingly ordinary heartbeat. You cannot return to your old way of living. You've awakened, and no one can fall back asleep once they've seen the light. No stream of creation ever arises from nothingness. No flower blooms without intelligent coordination within every cell. And no human being appears in this world randomly or meaninglessly. Your existence is not a biological accident or a coincidental result of genetics. You are a stream of consciousness in human form, a deliberate design of divine intelligence. And that intelligence isn't outside of you. It's operating from within. From the moment you were born, you carried the full code of the universe, not merely to survive, but to express a unique aspect of the perfection radiating throughout all existence. You don't need to read every book in the world or reach certain milestones to be considered wise. The most wondrous truth is this: you are already programmed to know. If you know how to listen to yourself, the deepest wisdom doesn't lie in accumulated knowledge, but in your ability to feel and align with the intelligence already present in every breath. You're not someone who needs to search for the light. You are where the light emanates. But there's one illusion most people fall for. They think wisdom belongs to the rational mind, to analysis, to sharp reasoning, when true wisdom comes from the quiet depths within, where every right answer needs no justification. If you've ever felt deeply certain about what needed to be done, even when logic couldn't explain why, if you've ever sat in silence before a decision and suddenly clarity arose as if you just knew from a place beyond language, then that was your inner divine wisdom speaking. It doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it doesn't argue. But when you are quiet enough to receive it, it never misguides. Every personal crisis is in truth a result of living against that wisdom. You know what's right, but you choose what's safe. You feel what's wrong, but you rationalize to accept it. You hear the inner prompting, but you suppress it out of fear of losing external stability. Slowly, you lose connection with your wise core and begin living by patterns society has designed, not what your soul has chosen. What's truly frightening is not ignorance, but knowing exactly what's right and losing the courage to live by it. Because divine wisdom doesn't force, doesn't push, it simply guides. And if you don't follow, it quietly steps aside, leaving room for louder voices, fear, bias, outdated beliefs. Your wisdom doesn't come from someone else's experience. It isn't found in moral doctrines imposed from outside. It is alive, subtle, and if you trust it deeply enough, it will lead you through crossroads that others may call crazy, but you know they are the only path that's right for you. Often, only after you've walked it will others realize you were right. But before that, you must be the only one brave enough to believe in your inner wisdom. in silence, in solitude, and in uncertainty. No great achievement ever began without trust in that pure intuition. The ones who transform the world are not those who know the most, but those most deeply connected to the truth within. Because when you live from the divine wisdom within, every action, every choice, every word carries the weight of presence. And that alone creates impact, not through eloquent speech, but through an authentic field that compels others to listen. You don't need to pretend to be someone else to be validated. Everything you need to lead is already inside you. The more you chase the right way outside, the more you lose the inner voice that knows what's right for you. And disorientation never stems from a lack of knowledge. It comes from no longer trusting the divine wisdom that's always been within. When you touch that wisdom, not with logic, but with presence, everything becomes clear. The relationships you must release, the habits you need to change, the behaviors that no longer reflect who you are, all become visible like reflections in a mirror. No one needs to instruct you. No tests are needed. Only your willingness to see and to act. No one is born limited. Only those who forget who they are. And when you remember, not through memory, but through awakening, that divine wisdom begins to flow again, strong, steady, unshakable. Because it is the one thing in you that cannot be bought, programmed, or deceived. There is nothing more noble than living in alignment with the wisdom already within you. No success is greater than becoming the true version your soul was born to express. And no peace is deeper than knowing every action, every word, every decision you make comes from the most luminous place inside you. You don't need to prove that you're smart. You only need to live wisely. And true wisdom does not show in correct answers. It reveals itself in choosing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, without needing to explain why. When you live this way, even your silence becomes an answer, and your presence alone inspires those around you to find themselves again. That's when you're not merely living, you are expressing divine wisdom in its fullest and most vibrant form. And no one, nothing outside of you can take that away, because it has always been you. You don't need to wear a monk's robe, sit in a temple, or hold sacred symbols in your hand to carry within you the seed of a boundless power. It's not about external symbols or miracles. It is the primal force embedded in your very blueprint from the moment you were formed. It has never been taken from you, only forgotten. Most people grow up with a mistaken belief that greatness belongs only to the exceptional few, that extraordinary power is a privilege reserved for the chosen. The truth is, everyone is chosen. The only difference is whether one is awake enough to realize it or still lost in the habit of denying oneself. If you've ever looked into the mirror and felt ordinary, if you've ever sat among others and felt invisible, it wasn't because you were truly lacking, but because you've grown too used to comparing what is visible to the eye with what is invisible to the mind. You judge yourself by status, income, appearance, age, forgetting that all of those things can change, but the sacred essence within you is unchanging. Think back to the moments when you showed strength far beyond what you thought possible, when you overcame pain that others believed would break you, when you rose from wounds you thought you'd never heal, when you kept walking through the fog, even when no one understood why you hadn't given up. That wasn't coincidence. That was a sign. The clearest proof that some part of you, deeper than willpower, more enduring than determination, was at work, even if you weren't fully conscious of it. That part is the seed of omnipotence. It doesn't depend on academic credentials, doesn't require noble lineage, doesn't wait for validation from anyone. It only asks that you remember you have it, that you stop defining yourself by your current outcomes and begin to look at yourself through the eyes of someone holding untapped potential. You don't need to understand everything before you take a step. You don't need to be perfect to begin. The seed of omnipotence doesn't grow according to linear logic. It expands in the soil of trust. And trust doesn't mean fantasy. Faith isn't believing in the absurd. It's believing in what lies deeper than reason. It means knowing that beneath the surface of failure, exhaustion, and pain, there is a fierce life force that has never stopped flowing. You can't see it because you're too busy engaging with your limitations. You can't feel it because your attention is scattered by external judgments. But whether you believe it or not, it still exists, silently, steadfastly, waiting for you to return. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be strong. The world needs people who dare to acknowledge that they already carry power and act from that place. You don't need to become someone else to live from your strength. You just need to stop pretending to be someone you're not. The seed of omnipotence doesn't sprout through perfection. It awakens through honesty. When you are honest with yourself, you create space for true power to speak. The issue isn't whether you have power, it's how you're using it. Every thought you repeat is a command sent to your subconscious. Every word you say to yourself is a form of programming your future. When you repeatedly affirm, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm not like others, you're not joking. You're using your power to feed exactly what you wish to escape. And then you think fate is against you, when in reality, you've unconsciously used the seed of omnipotence to recreate a limited life. But here's the good news. If you've used it to create pain, you can use it to create freedom. If you've unconsciously allowed it to serve fear, you can now consciously direct it to serve awareness. You don't need to change everything overnight. You only need to begin with mindfulness in the smallest choices. One positive thought, one self-affirmation full of belief, one action rooted in your essence rather than your ego. Each is a way to awaken and nurture that seed each day. You don't need to wait for a miracle. You are the miracle. Every decision you make in awareness is a step forward for the omnipotent force alive within you. Every time you refuse to live in fear, blame, or paralysis, you are choosing to express power more fully. No one needs to give you permission. You already have it. No one needs to approve. You are already enough. And the moment you stop waiting for validation from the outside, you begin to unlock the energy within. So powerful, no one can diminish it. The seed of omnipotence doesn't need to be replanted. It only needs to be named. And that name isn't found in anyone else's dictionary. It appears only when you dare to enter the space of silence, where you drop all assumptions about yourself, all roles you perform for the world. There is only you, facing the truth that you were born already, carrying what the entire universe is waiting for you to reveal. Stop shrinking yourself to fit the world. Start expanding so the world must recalibrate itself to you, not from arrogance, but from honesty, not from delusion, but from depth. Because if you don't acknowledge the omnipotent seed within, you'll spend your whole life waiting for someone else to, and that's a journey without end. You don't need to be chosen. You were created to choose. And the greatest choice is this. Will you continue to live as a reduced version of yourself, or will you begin to live as the full expression of the power you already possess? The truth doesn't wait for your belief to exist, but when you believe, it begins to move. And from that moment on, you no longer live the way you did. You begin to act, to think, to decide like someone who knows. I am where omnipotence reveals itself every minute, every day, in every concrete action. And that's not a fantasy. That is your nature. That is you. Everything you're experiencing right now is not a coincidence. The relationships you attract, the opportunities you encounter, even the limitations you keep repeating, don't come from the outside as you might think. They're shaped and molded from within you, from a hidden place most people ignore, thought. Reality doesn't give birth to thoughts. It's your repeated unconscious thoughts that have shaped the reality you now call my life. Most people live as if they're passive products of circumstance. I'm sad because work is too stressful. I'm anxious because I don't have enough money. I'm hurt because others mistreated me. But if you look deeper, you'll see it's not the event that causes pain, it's the way you think about it. It's not the lack of money that makes you worry, it's the fixed belief that having less money means you must worry. It's not rejection that wounds you, it's the mindset that says you must not be good enough to be accepted. And when you attach a negative meaning to an external event, that meaning becomes the real cause of suffering, not the event itself. This is not a call for self-blame or emotional denial. This is root-level transformation, recognizing that you're no longer the victim of life. You are the silent architect of all your experiences. The thoughts you repeated yesterday become the emotions you feel today. Those emotions guide your behaviors. Your behaviors shape results. And those results reinforce your old thinking patterns, a loop so perfect that without awareness, you believe circumstances are the cause and you're merely the effect. The world doesn't act on you first, you act on the world first, through each seemingly harmless thought. When you believe people only love the beautiful, you start behaving as if you're unworthy, hesitant, withdrawn, afraid to show up, and in doing so, you shrink your chances of connection. Then you say, see, I'm not loved. But you had already coded that outcome into reality, not through willpower, but through an unconscious belief you never questioned. Thought isn't just something you think about. It's the invisible energy field you emit every day, and the universe doesn't respond to what you wish for. It responds to what you consistently broadcast from within. You might say, I want to be wealthy, but if your core beliefs are, money is hard to earn, I'm bad at managing it, I don't deserve abundance, what you attract will not be prosperity, but experiences that reinforce the exact scarcity you unconsciously struggle. The truth is so simple, most people overlook it. You don't see and then believe, you believe and then you see. Those who believe the world is full of opportunity continually find opportunities others miss. Those who believe everyone is untrustworthy tend to attract betrayal. Because we don't see the world as it is, we see it through the lens of the mindset we've chosen. And once that mindset is repeated enough, it becomes the default filter through which we can no longer distinguish objective reality from projections of our own mind. This is why changing your life starts with changing how you think. Switching jobs, cities, or relationships won't free you from old problems. Because if the thinking stays the same, you'll recreate the same patterns in new places. It's like moving houses, but bringing all the clutter with you. Everything remains messy, just in a different space. Your mindset is the deepest luggage you carry through every change. And if you don't repack it consciously, it will decide everything for you. The fortunate truth is that thought is not destiny, it's a choice. But you must choose consciously. You must be aware enough to catch the stray thoughts running through your mind each day, brave enough to ask, who taught me to think this way? Does this mindset help me grow or hold me back? And gradually you stop living by hand-me-down thoughts from the past and begin constructing a mental map that reflects who you are becoming. Change doesn't come from a single motivational thought. It comes from the persistent repetition of new ways of thinking long enough to overwrite old structures. Every day you choose to think a little differently, from I can't to I'm learning how, from I always fail to I'm discovering what fits me better, from here comes another disaster to this is a chance to change how I respond. These seemingly small shifts, practiced consistently, rewire the circuits in your brain, and along with them, the pathways in your life. Thought is the root. Reality is only the shadow cast by that root on the ground. You can't change the shadow by adjusting the reflection. You must touch the source. And that source has always been within you. It needs no permission, no condition, only your willingness to return and take responsibility. Because once you truly grasp that everything you're living is the result of what you've accepted as true in your mind, you stop blaming. And when blame ends, power returns. You no longer wait for the world to change. You renew the world from the inside out. There is nothing more frightening than living forever in a reality of your own making while believing it was fate. And there is nothing more liberating than realizing I can think differently, and therefore I can live differently. All the tools to transform your life are already in your hands, starting with one single thing, choosing a new mindset. The rest, life will adjust naturally, not through magic, but through law. Not in a single day, but in every moment where you choose to think differently and to live from a new place within yourself. You were not created to imitate an external figure. You were created to reflect an inner principle. When the ancient phrase says, man is made in the image of God, many interpret it literally, as if there were a deity shaped like a human. But if you see only the surface meaning, you miss the key that unlocks the deepest divine essence within yourself. Image here is not about physical form. It is a spiritual archetype, a blueprint of original consciousness, a pattern of inner functioning that shares the same essence as the Creator. This means you were born with the capacity to create, decide, feel, love, and organize the world based on the very same principles by which the entire universe operates. You weren't thrown into life randomly to survive by instinct. You're an intentional expression, endowed with the power to shape reality through your consciousness and energy. And this isn't a privilege, it's a default. The real question is, do you dare to live in alignment with that default? Look around at the world, the magnificent structures, timeless works of art, world-changing inventions. All of them began as a single thought, and that thought was lit inside a human mind. When you realize that your creative structure mirrors that of God, you stop seeing yourself as someone trying to achieve something and start recognizing yourself as someone who is shaping the world through your very presence and thought. God does not create out of lack, he creates from fullness. And if you were made in that image, you weren't born to chase external fragments. You were meant to uncover the treasure already within. You don't need to earn your worth. You were designed to express value. What you need is not to learn more, but to remember. Confusion arises when people equate God's image with material power, status, or domination. But God does not control. He empowers. He does not impose. He grants freedom. He does not judge. He embraces. So if you share that essence, you too can become a creator, not a reactor. You can build instead of wait. You can inspire instead of compete. And above all, you can love unconditionally, not because others deserve it, but because you are the embodiment of unconditional love. The divine nature in you hasn't gone dormant. It's just buried under layers of conditioning, fear, wounds, and misidentification. You were taught to mimic others, to conform to templates, to obey predefined notions of success. But your original design was not made for replication. It was made for singular expression. And the tragic irony is, the more you try to become someone, the more you disconnect from what God actually placed in you. You weren't created to seek the light. You are part of that light. And his image is not seen in an outward perfection, but in the inner power to create, to heal, and to connect with every living being. Every time you choose forgiveness over resentment, restoration over destruction, steadfastness over collapse, you're living that design. No need to declare it, no need to preach. Your very presence becomes a reminder to others of their own sacred core. Living in the image of God doesn't mean becoming some lofty spiritual icon. It simply means living consciously. Being aware that every word you speak leaves an imprint. Every decision you make shapes a path. Every thought you nurture sends out a signal. And you are not a silent victim of life's flow. You are the one who can shape that flow through your awareness. You don't need recognition to believe you have value. You don't need someone else's love to believe you're worthy. You don't need perfect circumstances to live from the noblest place within you. Because if God is your origin, then your very being already holds non-negotiable worth. Nothing external can add or subtract from that, unless you agree to a smaller version of yourself. Remember, a copy can never carry the life force of the original. When you try to become a version of someone else, you reject the divine uniqueness placed in only you. And the world is left without a one-of-a-kind expression that only you could bring. No one can live out that image for you. No one can speak with your voice, create from your lens, or love with your heart. You are an irreplaceable soul because you were created to carry a piece of the Creator's will. The true meaning of being made in the image of God is not found in religious titles or theological doctrines. It lies in how you choose to live each day. Do you live as someone who remembers their power or someone waiting for permission? Do you walk as one with a mission or drift as if your existence is insignificant? Do you see others as equal souls or as objects to be judged? Your answer doesn't just reveal who you are, it defines the reality you're creating. You don't need more knowledge to live that image. You need to shed what's false, the beliefs that make you think you're small, the patterns that make you deny yourself, the habits that keep you locked in fear instead of openness. Once those layers fall away, what remains is light. Not a light you need to generate, but a light that has always been there, just waiting for you to stop covering it. Awakening doesn't come from striving to be superior. It comes when you look directly at the root and dare to accept one uncomfortable truth. I was created in the likeness of the Creator, and I am responsible for living in accordance with that, not to boast, but to live purposefully, not to show off, but to embody quiet strength, not to rise above others, but to remind them they too were created the same. You are no longer the one seeking power. You are the place where power is awakening. And the moment you live like that, everything around you must adjust, not because you demand it, but because you radiate a frequency that cannot be denied. It is the frequency of someone who has remembered who they are, and no one can fall back asleep after witnessing that light in you. No one truly loses their inner power. No one has ever been stripped of the sacred dignity encoded within them since the moment life began. These qualities can't be erased, only forgotten. What you call a fall is not the collapse of your essence, but merely the misdirection of your attention. The power remains whole and silent, waiting to be summoned. But if your gaze is fixed elsewhere, you'll live as if it never existed. People don't spiral into suffering because they are flawed. They suffer because they forget where to direct their mind. Instead of focusing on their unchanging divine core, they let their awareness be absorbed by external chaos, by appearances, by fleeting emotional storms. In doing so, they begin to identify with roles, achievements, failures, and wounds, things that don't reflect their true nature, but that are repeated often enough to become me. The greatest mistake is not that you once fell. It's believing that fall defines who you are. You start telling yourself, I'm not enough. I don't deserve it. I'm weak. I can't begin again. But those words are not truth. They are simply misplaced focus. You are not what happened to you. You are the one choosing how to respond to what happened. And through that choice, you are reshaping yourself every day. Falling does not prove you've lost your nobility. On the contrary, it signals that you are being called to return. No one feels lost unless there's an innate memory of the place they belong. And the pain you feel is not a punishment. It's a voice saying, look again, come back, remember where your life began. Life's downward spirals often happen when you invest all your attention in the external and forget the inner depth. You try to control circumstances, manipulate others, arrange outcomes, all while your inner world quietly withers. When things don't go your way, you believe the world is against you, but the world has no agenda. It's only reflecting what your mind is focused on. You stare at wounds, and the wounds expand. You stare at fear, and fear multiplies. You stare at lack, and lack becomes your lived reality. You haven't lost your light. You've just turned away from it. And with a simple shift in direction, your entire experience can transform. Don't let what you've been through become proof that you failed. Let it be feedback from the universe that your attention has been misplaced, that you've been living from the ego rather than the true self. And the moment you return, your power is still there, untouched, undiminished. The journey back begins with one simple act: pause. No need to understand everything, no need to analyze it all. Just stop and ask yourself, what am I focusing on? What am I building my life upon? If every day you repeat thoughts of fear, comparison, doubt, and judgment, your reality cannot help but reflect that. Because those very thoughts emit the signals that shape form, and if you are not awake, you will continue to feed your fall using the very sacred energy you never actually lost. No one is born to live in limitation, but if your eyes remain fixed on what's broken, missing, or unfinished, you will live as though limitation is destiny. In truth, destiny is simply the outcome of focusing on something long enough to make it real. And the deepest fall is not in action. It's in the subtle agreement with a smaller image of yourself. You may lose direction, but you never lose your compass. That compass is your self-awareness, the ability to see when you're off course and adjust. No one else can do that for you. No one else can bring you back to source. But the moment you agree to look inward, everything begins to shift quietly, without drama, just a subtle movement in the deepest space, a return of attention to your inner center. Recovery doesn't require superhuman strength. It requires a consistent choice to re-choose what you focus on. Instead of staring at what's gone, focus on what remains. Instead of living from memories of pain, live from the potential of rebirth. Instead of trying to become someone else, begin the return to yourself. Every action from that place is a solid step lifting you out of the fall, not with shame, not with blame, but with clarity. You don't need to start over. You just need to remember who you are. When your attention is realigned, your power naturally returns to orbit, not because it just appeared, but because you stopped feeding false images with your energy. And from that moment on, you begin rebuilding, not with effort, but with awareness. You'll stop chasing salvation. You'll understand you were never deprived of anything. And the fall is just one chapter in your story, not the ending. Your power has not corroded. It's simply waiting for you to notice it again. Choose again where you look, because it is that gaze which determines the reality you live within. And you always have the right to lift your head, to return, to reawaken your powerful self through one single act. Redirect your attention from fear to essence, from judgment to understanding, from separation to integration. No one else can do it for you, but you can begin right now. And once you do, the fall will no longer be something to fear. It becomes the very stepping stone for you to rise, stronger, deeper, and more awake than ever before. No one is truly poor unless they've first carried a thought of scarcity in their mind. No one is truly powerless unless they've grown a belief that they're not enough. Lack doesn't begin with the external world. It begins with a slight misalignment in the mind. That moment when you shift your gaze away from what's already abundant and begin counting what you don't yet have. From that moment on, you stop living as someone who holds divine power and start behaving like someone begging for drops of recognition, fragments of love, and fleeting chances to survive. And the truth is, nothing has ever been taken from you. You've just been looking in the wrong direction. The misalignment isn't in reality, it's in the lens you're using to look at it. When your mind is trained to see lack, you'll see it everywhere. When you live from the belief, I don't have enough, then no matter how much your reality changes, you'll keep repeating the same feeling of emptiness. Because the issue isn't in your material conditions, it lies in your focal point of awareness, and if you don't shift that focus, you'll always live as someone deprived, even if your hands are full of everything others dream of. Reality doesn't exist to limit you. It's an honest mirror that reflects exactly where your attention is. If you pour all your presence into what you lack, you are feeding the very sensation you're trying to escape. The more you worry about not having enough money, the more distant money feels. The more you crave love to fill the void, the more fragile relationships become. Because when you step into the world from a state of not enough, you're not truly giving. You're bargaining, not because you're bad, but because you've mistakenly believed that value must come from something outside of you. No circumstance can make you feel lack unless you agree with the thought that it can. And that's the key point. You are not the victim of lack. You are the one still choosing to focus on it. That's not easy to hear, but it's what will set you free. Because if the feeling of lack is only the result of misplaced focus, then you can choose again. Right now, you don't have to wait for your circumstances to change. You don't have to become more deserving. You simply have to turn inward and remember, you lack nothing required to live fully. You can't perceive abundance if you're always wearing lenses that magnify dissatisfaction. And this world will never stop feeding you borrowed definitions of success, abundance, happiness, until you always feel you haven't arrived yet. But if you pause and strip away those external definitions, you'll see everything truly necessary for conscious living is already here. Not in the future, not after a goal is reached, but right here, in your breath, in your ability to choose, in the awareness that is already present. You don't need to have more to feel enough. You need to learn how to return your attention to what is already here and live from a deep gratitude so unwavering that nothing can shake you with a sense of lack. This state isn't an emotion, it's a habit of perception. It's the ability to begin the day not by asking life to give you something, but by asking, what can I give today? Can I show up as an expression of fullness rather than chase it? When you live from fullness, you don't become passive. On the contrary, you act from a place of deep inner freedom. You no longer work to prove, to compensate, or to earn enough. You act as someone who knows they're creating from wholeness, and that difference changes the world's response to you. No more loops of effort, exhaustion, scarcity. Instead, a natural flow of giving, receiving, expanding. Fulfillment isn't a destination, it's a state you can choose to live from. And when you shift your perspective, reality shifts. Not because you're delusional, but because the universe mirrors the frequency you emit. Live from gratitude and you'll find more to be grateful for. Live from a sense of sufficiency and new opportunities will emerge. Not because miracles happen, but because you've adjusted the root source of your experience, your attention. The feeling of enough doesn't come from having everything, but from knowing you don't need to have everything to be yourself. True freedom begins when you no longer let possessions, people, or external conditions define your worth. And the paradox is, the moment you stop chasing more, you receive more than anyone ever holding on tightly. Because you're no longer grasping, you're attracting. No longer demanding, you're inviting. No longer fearing, you're trusting. You don't need to change the whole world to escape the feeling of lack. You just need to change one thing, where you place your gaze. When you stop looking at what's missing, lack loses its power. When you stop nurturing the belief, I'm not enough, you automatically cut off the energy that sustains that limited reality. And the miracle doesn't happen outside, it happens in the deep silence when you return to the root awareness. I have always been enough, by nature, by origin, within myself. No one can make you feel inadequate unless you believe they hold something you need. But the truth is, no one can give you a sense of value if you haven't yet seen it in yourself. So stop asking the world what you should be asking yourself. And don't delay the feeling of being whole until conditions change. Conditions will always change, but your worth won't. It's within you, unshakable. You are not lacking. You have never been lacking. You only need to pause, adjust the lens, and see your whole life from a place of fullness. When you do that, there is no need to justify, no need to prove, just be, and the world will begin to shift in ways you never imagined. Not because you controlled it, but because you've become a natural part of a greater flow, where everything has always been enough, simply waiting for you to stop looking in the wrong direction. It's not your circumstances, but your beliefs that silently govern how your brain organizes the world. Each repeated thought doesn't just pass by like a wisp of smoke. It leaves a trace in your neural architecture, forming new networks and reinforcing mental pathways that you eventually call me. You don't live in the world as it is. You live in a world colored by what you've chosen to believe is true. And once a belief becomes central, everything else begins to adjust itself to align with it, including how you see, feel, decide, and even recall your past. The brain isn't working against you. It serves you loyally, meticulously. The problem is it doesn't know whether you're feeding it a healing belief or a limiting one. It doesn't distinguish truth from repetition. It simply records, reinforces, and strengthens whatever signal you broadcast most often. If you believe you're weak, your brain will filter reality to confirm it. If you believe life is always lacking, you'll start seeing shortage everywhere. But if you believe you are capable of overcoming, your brain will activate every resource it can to help make that real. Belief is not the slogans you say out loud when you're feeling inspired. Belief is the stream of thoughts you repeat silently so often that your brain begins optimizing in that direction. It no longer treats the thought as a hypothesis. It makes it the default operating pattern. From that point forward, your decisions are no longer acts of logic. They become unconscious continuations of a belief structure deeply embedded in your nervous system. That structure is not fixed, but it won't change easily unless you intervene intentionally. You can't break a belief just by reading a book or hearing a lecture. You need to create new experiences and repeat them often enough for your nervous system to realize this is the new truth. The brain learns through consistency, not fleeting emotions. And that's why real transformation requires discipline, not just to try something new, but to maintain it until the old structure breaks. You don't need to change who you are by forcing yourself to become someone else. You only need to gradually dismantle the belief systems that no longer serve you, because beneath every learned layer of thought, there still exists your original self, whole, powerful, awake. When you clean out the mental operating system, you don't need to add anything. You just need to remove what's been clogging the natural flow of your being. And this process begins with a brutally honest question. What do I actually believe? Not on your lips, but in your daily unconscious reactions. The brain has a mechanism called confirmation bias. It filters in data that aligns with your existing beliefs, which means if you believe the world is dangerous, you'll overlook opportunities because your brain filtered them out before you saw them. If you believe you're a failure, your moments of success will blur, and only your missteps will stand out, not because you lack achievement, but because you can't see it through your current lens. You don't lack results. You lack the right belief to let your brain access the full picture. Each morning, you don't wake up to a completely new day. You are handed back a script you've been writing with every thought from yesterday, last week, and years before that. This script isn't forced upon you, it's chosen unconsciously. And what keeps you looping in it is the fact that you keep playing the same role without ever checking who's directing the show inside your head. When a limiting belief is central, every new idea is dismissed as an outsider. But when you install a liberating belief, the brain begins to welcome wonder again. Don't try to convince yourself with words. Convince yourself with repeated action. Someone who believes in their worth doesn't need to shout for validation. They live as if that worth is self-evident. And every small act from that place strengthens new neural pathways, marking the beginning of an entirely different belief system. You don't need to do something grand. You just need to repeat what's right, often, consistently, without compromise. The brain follows where you are most consistent, not where you are momentarily inspired. One of the most common misconceptions is believing that I'll believe it once I see proof. But in reality, the opposite is true. Only when you believe it will you begin to see the proof. Otherwise, you'll look right past every opportunity, compliment, or achievement and still claim, I'm not good enough. That's why some of the most self-doubting people are actually the most gifted. Yet, unaware, they don't see themselves as they are. They see themselves through a belief lens, distorted by the past. If you want to change your life, you can't just change your environment. You need to change the belief structures that underlie all your reactions. When you shift the central belief, your brain will no longer resist growth. It will begin to rebuild, not through strain, but through its own natural design. Because you don't have to fight your brain. You just need to lead it with clear, repeated, consistent choices. And soon your brain will restructure not just how you think, but how you feel, decide, and shape your entire reality. You are not limited by genetics or history. You are only held back by the beliefs you repeat. And if you dare to change what you believe, you won't just change your brain. You will change your entire life, not through mysticism, but through biology. Everything you experience on the outside originates from an invisible starting point, your inner self-identification, not your name, title, or social role, but two of the most potent words in existence, I am. Whatever you place after that phrase, whether consciously or not, becomes the main frequency of the energy you emit and the direct signal that shapes the reality forming around you. I am is not just a statement. It is a programming mechanism. It is the root source code that defines who you are and activates the entire living script behind every choice, behavior, and outcome. No one can label you as something you haven't already silently accepted within. Wounding doesn't come from what others say. It comes from the unconscious agreement you make with it. When someone calls you useless, it doesn't hurt unless a part of you has already believed, I am not good enough. Conversely, if you've deeply anchored the awareness that I am light, I am trustworthy, I am the embodiment of wisdom, then external definitions no longer have the power to pierce that stable energy. Power is not in the circumstance, it lies in the response you choose when defining yourself. At the deepest level, the universe doesn't respond to what you want. It responds precisely to the frequency of the I am you broadcast each day. When you say, I am someone who always struggles, you've issued a creative command. When you say, I am bad at communicating, you've locked the doors to growth. Your brain will begin optimizing itself according to that program, and every cell in your body will act as if that belief is law. But it's not truth. It's just the unconscious repetition of an ingrained affirmation. You are not the product of fate. You are the product of a sequence of I am statements you've lived by, sometimes for decades. If you want to change your life, you don't need to start with grand actions. You need to start with one foundational question. Who am I unconsciously identifying as every single day? The answer to that question will explain why your life looks the way it does, and it will also reveal the key to a completely different reality if you're brave enough to redefine it. The I am awareness isn't about inflating the ego, it's about awakening the true self. When you say I am peace, you're not doing it to seem perfect. You're activating an energy that's already present within you but has been buried under chaos. When you affirm, I am valuable, you don't need to overcompensate through actions. You simply live from a place that already knows it's true. and your behavior will naturally shift. You cannot create a different reality if you cling to the same old self-definition. The great masters didn't begin by changing the world. They began by redefining themselves. They didn't say, "I'll try to be strong." They said, "I am strength." And because they lived as if that were obvious, every action, word, and vibration they expressed matched that frequency. The world had no choice but to respond, because the universe doesn't listen to the words you speak when you try to be positive. It hears the "I am." You believe most deeply, often in the moments you're least guarded. So be cautious of how you name yourself, especially in silence. When you miss an opportunity, what do you whisper to yourself? "I'm so stupid," or "I'm learning to grow stronger"? These two identifications create completely different realities, even if they stem from the same event. And it's these small, repeated declarations that silently shape the entire arc of your life. If you want to rise to a higher level of living, begin by choosing a new identity. Not with loud affirmations meant to temporarily make you feel better, but with a deep, conscious choice. Who am I in my unshakable essence? Rewrite it, live from it, and let your brain, your emotions, your behaviors, and your reality revolve around that new belief. When your "I am" changes, everything else cannot remain the same. You don't have to wait until you succeed to say, "I am successful." You need to say it from within, live accordingly, and let the world catch up to the alignment you've just claimed. Let "I am" become the central broadcast that guides your interactions, your choices, your vision, because if you don't consciously define what "I am" means, the world will define it for you, based on your past, your fears, and the lowest common denominators of external expectation. And then you're no longer living, you're just reacting. "I am" is not a magic phrase. It is the source code of creative power. And when you learn to use it correctly, not repeated from fear, but spoken from truth, you will enter a realm where the impossible starts to operate. Not because you change the world, but because you change the one creating it. You. And only then do you stop trying to master life and instead become its true creator from the root. You cannot plant the seeds of peace on soil overrun with the weeds of resentment, insecurity, and anxiety. Just like a garden, the mind cannot bear sweet fruit if you let it grow wild, poisoned, or cluttered with emotional debris left unresolved. The sad truth is, most people don't treat their minds as sacred ground. They treat them like dumpsters for every negative thing they encounter. Criticism from others, unhealed wounds from the past, recurring fears triggered like reflexes. They don't clean, don't filter, don't tend to it. And then they wonder why their life refuses to blossom. A garden thrives only with care. So does the mind. It must be observed daily, watered with light-filled thoughts, and cleared of the weeds of unconscious negative mental patterns. This doesn't mean you must always stay positive. It means becoming a responsible gardener, recognizing which emotions are rising, identifying them, and choosing whether to continue feeding them. No more judging emotions, but also no more allowing them to multiply without order. Emotional waste doesn't arise from major life events. It accumulates in droplets every day. One time you swallowed your anger instead of expressing it. One time you forgave only halfway. One time you denied pain behind a polite smile. Over the years, these moments become the background scent of your mind. You no longer recognize the imbalance because it has become your new normal. You just feel tired, unmotivated, disconnected, but can't quite explain why. It's because you've been living in an abandoned garden without realizing it. The mind is the gateway to the deepest source of life within you. But if it's buried under layers of undigested psychic residue, the light of the soul cannot pass through. This is why so many people, despite good intentions, struggle to maintain clarity. It's not because they lack willpower. It's because the soil their awareness stands on isn't clean enough to hold the seed of truth. When your mind is saturated with worry, envy, and judgment, you create a magnetic field that continues to attract negativity, not because you're flawed, but because you haven't yet cleared your energetic space enough to draw in what is whole and good. True strength doesn't mean having no negative emotions. It means being awake enough not to entangle them with your identity. Strong people see their emotions, name them, and deal with them before they harden into a way of life. They understand a negative thought isn't a problem, but when repeated, rooted, and accepted as default, it becomes a psychological mold that shapes every reaction and decision, like a weed that takes over the entire garden if not pulled up by the root. Tending to your mind is not a hobby for moments of inspiration. It is a profound spiritual act. It begins with honesty, being willing to face the parts of yourself you avoid. It continues with discipline, taking time each day to cleanse your mind as a quiet ritual. No need for drama, no need for witnesses. It could be a still morning with a blank page. It could be a silent moment with your hand over your heart asking, what is my mind holding today that no longer serves me? From that moment on, you become the gardener of your own life force. A miracle happens when you begin to clean. New space opens by itself. When you free the mind from old burdens, creative flow begins to return. Intuition becomes clearer. New inspiration arises as if from nowhere. But it isn't magic. It's the natural result of removing the blockage. Clarity has always been there. You just hadn't made room for it. And a clean mind is not only home to healthy thinking, it becomes the portal to the sacred wisdom already living within you. You don't need to eliminate all negative emotions to be pure, but you do need to take responsibility for what you hold on to and what you release. A person with inner power isn't unshakable, but they are crystal clear that not all emotions are worth keeping, not all memories are worth cherishing, not all thoughts speak truth. And this deliberate selection creates clarity not in the intellect, but in the soul. When cared for properly, the mind becomes more than a place for thought. It becomes a channel to your deepest self. It is a mirror of the soul, and like all mirrors, if it's too clouded with dust, you can no longer see the light within. But if you are willing to clean it each day, you'll be surprised to find the light never left. It was only hidden, and all you ever needed to do was remove the layers that obscured it. No garden remains wild forever if the gardener returns, and no mind is ever truly ruined if you begin to nurture healthy thoughts again, slowly, gently, without force. As long as you are honest with yourself, everything else will begin to realign, because when someone chooses to live as though their mind is sacred ground, their entire life begins to reflect that sacredness in the smallest details. And that's not a philosophy. That is a way of living. What defines your life isn't what others say to you, but what you repeat to yourself after the noise has faded. Your reality isn't built by criticism or praise from the outside world. It's formed by the quiet, persistent conversation you maintain in your own mind. That voice may be silent to others, but it's powerful enough to lift you up or tear you down, to lead you toward healing or trap you in wounds long left unattended. And unless you learn to see it clearly, take ownership of it, and rewire it with intention, all your outer efforts will remain temporary fixes. The mind never stops talking. It interprets, reacts, compares, and judges, almost nonstop. But most of what it says isn't truth. It's a script written from past experiences, unhealed emotional scratches, and premature conclusions you unconsciously adopted in childhood. I'm not good enough. I'll always be left behind. I don't deserve anything better. These aren't whispers from someone else. They're statements you've been silently repeating to yourself over and over until they became your lived reality. Every time you fail, your inner dialogue decides the meaning. Either this is a necessary lesson for my growth, or I can never get things right. That unconscious decision How you speak to yourself creates your definition of self. And when that definition is repeated long enough, it moves from thought to feeling to behavior to identity. You begin to act as if it's true. You shrink from opportunities. You hold back your voice when it matters, not because you lack ability, but because your inner script has labeled you as not enough. The strange thing is, you can speak with compassion to others while being harsh with yourself. You encourage your friends through their failures, but scold yourself for the smallest misstep. You comfort others when they're weary, but deny yourself permission to rest, and then you wonder why you're always exhausted. It's because you've been living under an inner dialogue that lacks kindness, healing, and support. And you can't walk tall when the voice inside you is constantly pushing you down. Freedom doesn't come from silencing the inner voice. It comes from transforming it, not by muting the mind, but by retraining it with a new language, the language of growth, compassion, and truth. When you begin speaking to yourself with gentleness, not as an escape from flaws, but as a path to honest healing, you will notice your entire life experience begin to shift. Because emotions don't originate outside you, they are responses to the story you're telling yourself. And when you change the story, you change the emotion, the energy, and the outcome. Someone with strong inner power has an inner dialogue that is clear, honest, and kind. They may not say anything outwardly, but within they speak to themselves like a wise guide, a trusted friend. They are not blindly optimistic, nor are they cruelly pessimistic. They say what needs to be said. I'm in the process of growing. I've made mistakes, but I'm not a mistake. I may not be there yet, but I'm walking the right path. These words aren't mantras. They are the new framework of identity. Pay attention. The people you admire are rarely those who have an easy life, but those who speak to themselves powerfully in hard times. You won't hear them say, I'm worthless. They say, I'm learning. You won't see them drown in regret. They extract the lesson, adjust the course, and move forward. Not because they're stronger than you, but because they've trained their inner voice like a muscle. And if you don't train that voice, it will train you. From this moment forward, treat every sentence you say to yourself as a seed. Every self-criticism is a weed. Every sincere encouragement is a sprouting bud. You get to choose which seed you'll water, and you carry the responsibility to decide which words will form the foundation of the life you're building. If you want peace, it cannot grow from, I'm such a failure. If you want to feel whole, you cannot keep feeding yourself, there's nothing special about me. The words you repeat are the destiny you're calling into existence. Pause and ask yourself, if I said to the person I love most in this world the same things I say to myself every day, would they still feel worthy? If the answer is no, then it's time for change. Not because you need to pretend to be strong, but because you deserve an inner voice that lifts you up, not one that drags you down. Once you master your inner dialogue, you'll no longer fear silence, because in that quiet space, you're no longer under attack from within. You become a safe refuge for your own soul. And that is the deepest foundation of inner freedom, untouchable by the world. When life around you crumbles, you'll still hear a steady voice inside whispering, I'm still here, and I have the strength to rebuild. When things fall apart, you'll hear within, I will start again, this time with deeper roots. You don't need anyone to pull you from the dark if you can speak to yourself in the light. And if each day begins with one true sentence, one compassionate definition, one intentional shift, then you don't need a revolution. You are already building a new life from the inside out. And that is a power no one can give you except you. There is a truth most people avoid, not because they don't know it, but because they don't dare to believe it. You were born with a sacred identity. Not after you become perfect, not after you eliminate every bad habit, but from the very moment you appeared in this life, you already carried within you the mark of the divine, a flame of creation, a spark of the higher source, a natural ability to build, to heal, and to bloom simply by existing. But because the world never taught you how to believe in this truth, you grew up with a sense of smallness. Pride is the illusion of the ego. Recognizing your divine identity is the awakening of the soul. The ego wants you to believe you are superior to others, but your sacred identity reminds you that you lack nothing to be whole, not by being better than anyone, but by being true to yourself. That difference is what makes the essence of your being sacred. Someone can live quietly in the world, without fame, without praise, and yet walk steadily and consciously because they know who they are. They don't need to boast, but neither do they deny the light that lives within them. You cannot live with deep gratitude if you still think you're just a cosmic accident, because when you realize you are an irreplaceable part of divine order, every breath, every decision, every emotion you experience carries a meaning far greater than yourself. And from that place, you no longer live just to survive. You live to resonate, to uplift, to transmit a frequency where your very presence can soothe someone who's lost. You don't need to preach. You simply need to fully embody your authentic identity. Many confuse humility with self-minimization. They think diminishing themselves is noble. They reject praise, dismiss innate gifts, constantly step aside for others, not out of love, but because deep down, they don't believe they're worthy. But here is the truth. Denying your light is not humility. It's a form of spiritual rejection. You weren't born to shrink in fear of making others uncomfortable. You were born to be you, fully, deeply, courageously, and consciously. The world doesn't need more people so humble that they forget themselves. The world needs people strong enough to stand in their light without arrogance, silent enough to take responsibility without avoidance, sincere enough to say, I know who I am, and I will live fully as that. Because only when you acknowledge your divine identity can you truly recognize it in others. And that's the foundation of real love, not pity, but reverence between two souls on equal ground. Think back to the moments when you felt lost, useless, confused, insecure, not because you were truly worthless, but because you had forgotten the identity deeper than all societal roles. You started defining yourself through jobs, income, public opinions, and when those things broke, you felt like you had nothing left. But if you've been there, you already understand. External identities may shift, but the soul's identity never does. It's always there, waiting for you to return. Awakening is not about discovering something new. It's about remembering what you've always known, hidden beneath the noise of everyday life. Divine identity isn't about becoming flawless. It's about daring to live authentically, choosing from love instead of fear, acting not to prove yourself, but to align with the deep truth your intuition already holds. Every small act from that place, whether listening fully, standing your ground, or saying no to what doesn't feel right, is a living expression of the sacred in daily life. You don't need to prove anything to be worthy of that identity. You just need to stop denying it. Stop living like a secondary character in your own story. Stop bowing to old voices that once told you you're nothing special, because the truth is you carry a part of the divine, not because you're better than others, but because you belong to the whole. And when you live in alignment with that truth, you no longer chase anything outside of you. You become the channel through which sacred energy moves, heals, and expands. Starting today, change the way you see yourself. Don't ask, who am I to dream of that? Ask instead, if I truly was born with a sacred mission, what is the most honest thing I must do now? And let every choice emerge from that answer. Don't live just to avoid mistakes. Live to embody the light you were sent here to carry, not loudly, not theatrically, but clearly, steadily, with no compromise in the face of self-shrinking. When you reclaim your divine identity, you'll stop seeking permission from the outside. You won't wait for someone to empower you. You will know that every decision you make is guided from a place deeper than ego. And that gives you a quiet kind of power. No need to raise your voice, no need to assert yourself. Just be there, fully present, because you know truth doesn't need to be proven, It only needs to be lived. And that's the path you're being called to return to, not to become someone else, but to come home to the whole sacred, radiant you. Forgiveness is not a moral gesture to make others feel better. Forgiveness is the wisest act you can do to restore yourself. It doesn't change the past, but it determines whether you remain imprisoned by it. Every time you carry a wound into the days ahead, you block the stream of life energy that is trying to flow through you. Anger, resentment, and hatred are not signs of strength. They're indicators of an energy system in distress, stuck, and unable to move. When you don't forgive, you hold on to the past event with your full present emotion. You don't just remember, you relive. You don't merely recall. You continue reacting. And even if the other person is gone, even if the moment has passed, you remain trapped. You are the one carrying a burden that could have been laid down long ago, not because the other person deserves your forgiveness, but because you deserve your freedom. Some say, I can't forgive because I can't forget. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Forgiveness means remembering without being drained. It's looking back without shaking or falling apart. Forgiveness doesn't erase the scars, it removes the shackles. And only when you untie that invisible rope from your heart can you walk forward without dragging the pain behind you. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong enough that no one else can control your emotions. It's not surrender. It's rising above a battle that no longer serves you. Because each time you hold on to the hurt, you hand over control of your mind and energy to something that no longer exists. Forgiveness is claiming sovereignty over your life again. Forgiving others is one part, but there's something even harder and more crucial: forgiving yourself. Forgiving the times you chose wrongly because you didn't know better. Forgiving your moments of weakness when you stayed silent instead of speaking, when you ran instead of facing. Forgiving the decisions that hurt you, not because they were right, but because you learned what you needed. You cannot heal if you continue to beat yourself with the stick of the past. No one grows from self-punishment. Only compassion and understanding pave the path forward. Imagine your mind as a river. Each painful memory left unforgiven is a boulder blocking the flow. The water no longer runs freely. It swirls, darkens, stagnates, but once you start removing those stones through letting go, understanding, and choosing not to carry those wounds anymore, the river flows again, gently, powerfully, unstoppably. That is forgiveness, an internal decision that transforms the entire current of your outer life. Make no mistake, forgiveness does not mean tolerating repeated harm. Forgiveness is not blind. It sees clearly what happened and still chooses not to let it control the present. Forgiveness is not the role of the victim. It's the act of the one restoring wholeness. You can forgive and still draw firm boundaries. You can forgive and walk away without looking back. Forgiveness doesn't require you to keep anyone in your life. It simply asks that you don't keep bitterness in your heart. Some carry anger all their lives, thinking it protects them from further hurt. But anger is a fence of thorns. It doesn't just keep others out, it wounds the one inside. Forgiveness is dismantling that fence so you can breathe again. A heart that's been freed is not only more peaceful, it is clearer, more open, more willing to love without dragging old pain along. Remember this: the person who hurt you doesn't get to decide how long you live in suffering. Only you hold that power, and you exercise it through forgiveness, through no longer repeating the old story in a way that reopens the wound, through shifting from "I was hurt" to "I'm healing," through realizing that what happened was part of your growth, not a life sentence for your soul. If forgiveness feels too hard, begin with honesty. Say to yourself, I can't forgive today, but I don't want to carry this anymore. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It's a choice made over and over. You may have to choose it daily, but every time you do, a layer of old energy is released. Every time you choose, a piece of your freedom returns. In the end, forgiveness doesn't change the other person. It changes you. It allows you to live in the present, unmanipulated by the shadows of the past. It gives back the peace you once lost. And above all, it reminds you, you were not born to wear chains. You were born to walk freely, firmly, and full of light. Forgiveness has always been the key in your hands, and now is the time to use it. Not for anyone else, but for you. Prosperity isn't defined by how much money you hold. It's defined by the quality of energy you operate from. Money may come and go, but someone with a prosperous mindset naturally attracts aligned opportunities, meaningful connections, and a deep sense of abundance that isn't dictated by the number in a bank account. Ironically, those who chase money as the ultimate goal are often the ones who feel the most lack, because they're vibrating at a frequency of scarcity, and the law of resonance never fails. You cannot attract prosperity when fear of loss dominates your inner world. The flow of prosperity is a living expression of energy. It must be created, nurtured, and kept in motion. When you offer value, when you express gratitude instead of complaint, when you act from ownership instead of neediness, you activate the current of abundance. And once that flow is set in motion, your job isn't to control it, it's to stay aligned with it. Don't let the question of is it enough yet interrupt the stream that's trying to reach you. Truly prosperous people don't wait to have everything before they live in abundance. They embody abundance first, and that very embodiment calls in what they need. They understand that material wealth is only a delayed reflection of their inner state. If their internal world is generous, grateful, secure, and creative, the external world will mirror that through tangible forms: money, resources, support, and opportunities. What traps someone in lack isn't the external situation, it's their internal operating system. If you're still running old programs like money only comes through suffering, wealth equals greed, I don't deserve this, or just enough is good enough, then every effort you make to earn will come with conflict. You might earn, but you'll lose it fast. You might work hard, but never feel secure, because you cannot rise beyond your inner limits without shifting the energy that defines them. Prosperity is a stream, and like all streams, it needs a source. That source isn't the market, the economy, or chance. It's the emotional and energetic state you live in daily. If you start your morning in a rush, worried about bills, feeling short on time, resenting your work, blaming your clients, you've already cut the source. Even if you work 12 hours, it's coming from a state of lack, not creation. And the results will carry the mark of that energy. In contrast, if your day begins with gratitude, a recognition of your own value, and a spirit of service rather than force, you open the valve. When you don't just work to earn money, but to share real value, the current of prosperity begins to shift. And those living in that current, even if not immediately wealthy, are never left behind. Life finds a way to meet them with exactly what's needed at exactly the right time in exactly the right form. Look at the trees. They don't worry about sunlight or rain. They simply fulfill their role, growing, rooting, blooming, and nature provides the rest. You are no different. When you live fully from your inner value, when you give what is right to give, when your mind is free from comparison and fear, you are fulfilling your role. And prosperity follows, not as a reward to be fought for, but as a natural consequence of alignment. True prosperity doesn't make you anxious. It makes you generous. You no longer live clinched, calculating every move. You willingly invest in what matters. You dare to say no to things that cheapen your core values. You don't buy glamour to mask insecurity. You choose deep simplicity as a lifestyle. And that is the clearest sign of a prosperous mind. No showmanship, no fear, no need to prove anything. The material world is always in motion. Prices fluctuate, jobs change, markets shift. But those anchored in prosperous energy don't let their identity be tossed by surface waves. They understand that all of it is just reflection. They don't react, they navigate. They don't panic, they tune their frequency, because they know prosperity doesn't live in your bank balance. It lives in the quality of your inner current. And that current is the one thing you can consciously operate each day. If you're living in the feeling of lack, stop blaming circumstances and start observing the energy you emit. Don't try to earn more before you fix the leak in your vessel. Don't stack more knowledge on top of a fear-filled foundation. Start by becoming the kind of person who can hold abundance, not in a day, but in every choice. Choose a thought of sufficiency over a fear of loss. Choose to act from contribution, not desperation. Choose to trust the flow instead of clinging to control. And when you practice that long enough, you'll notice everything you once chased will begin to find you. Not because you forced it, but because you became the version of yourself that prosperity can stay with. No more conflict, no more fear, no more fragmentation, just one clear, consistent, life-giving current. That's when you stop seeking prosperity because you've become its living embodiment. No pain ever arises without a deeper voice behind it. No illness forms without an energetic misalignment that's been present for long enough. Your body does not betray you. It simply tells the truth more clearly than your mind does. When you become accustomed to suppressing, ignoring, or overriding emotional signals, your body steps in to speak on your behalf. It doesn't lie. It doesn't make excuses. It mirrors the exact frequency you've been living in through every heartbeat, hormone, and ache. Most people think health is solely the result of nutrition, exercise, or genetics. But stopping there overlooks the root, the state of your inner consciousness. The body is programmed by the mind, and the mind runs on belief, whether you're aware of those beliefs or not. If you believe you're weak, you'll behave like someone who is. If you believe you're prone to illness, your body will respond accordingly. The body doesn't distinguish between truth and limiting belief. It simply executes the command you silently repeat. You cannot sustain a healthy body while constantly emitting stress signals. You cannot maintain heart coherence if your days are filled with anxiety, resentment, or self-judgment. Because every emotion leaves a biological imprint. Anger tightens the blood vessels. Fear constricts the digestive system. Insecurity disrupts the immune response. Chronic loneliness causes micro damage at the cellular level. And when those emotions loop day after day, disease doesn't come from the outside. It arises from the programming you never changed. There are people who eat well, exercise consistently, and still feel exhausted. That's because the body doesn't only need calories, it needs a peaceful mind. It doesn't only need vitamins, it needs a hopeful outlook. It doesn't only need physical rest, it needs the release of emotional tension. The fatigue you feel may not stem from work, but from the unresolved inner battles. Trying to please everyone, living out of alignment with your values, carrying unsaid words. These drain your vitality quietly, day after day. The body doesn't respond to circumstances, it responds to how you perceive them. Two people can experience the same pressure, but the one with a healthy inner system regulates their physiological response. The one with programming like, I'm powerless, or life is against me, will spiral into depletion, not because of the situation, but because of emotional frequency. And that frequency is shaped by thought patterns you've repeated for years, often without noticing. Healing doesn't begin with medication, it begins with inner dialogue. Observe the voice in your head. What words do you repeat most? Are they, I'm so tired, I'm done, I can't take this anymore? Your body is listening. It doesn't argue, it doesn't question. It absorbs and responds. And if those negative loops are constant, don't be surprised when you wake up drained, unsure why your spark is gone. Begin by updating your inner vocabulary. Instead of saying, I'm exhausted, try, I'm recharging my energy. Instead of I'm always sick, say, I'm building a new foundation for health. Instead of I'm weak, gently remind yourself, my body is healing more each day. Don't wait for belief to change before speaking positively. Speak it first, and the body will begin to shift alongside you. Your internal language is the bloodstream of your vitality. Change it, and you change the current of your well-being. Recall the moments when you felt your healthiest. Not during strict diets or supplement regimens, but when life felt meaningful, when you loved yourself, when you were excited, when you stopped blaming the past. That's when your consciousness was in harmony. And where there's harmony, there is healing. Your body doesn't need to be controlled, it needs to be accompanied, not forced, just heard and honored. Not every illness can vanish overnight, but every deep healing process must begin at the level of consciousness, when you tend to your thoughts as you would your skin, when you realize that repeating a negative belief is like planting poison inside your system, when you dare to place a hand over your heart each morning and speak kindly to yourself. Small acts like these carry a biological impact more powerful than most medicines. Health isn't just a physical state. It's a complete reflection of who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, and the frequency you carry each day. You can't pretend to be healthy, but you can start creating it by transforming how you think about yourself. Every time you adopt a new belief, every time you release an old emotion, every time you act from love instead of fear, you reprogram your body toward vibrancy and clarity. You don't have to wait until you're sick to care about your health, just as you don't need to collapse before you learn to listen. Your body is your most loyal ally, a biological map of your consciousness in motion, and if today you choose to befriend it, not through control, but through understanding and gratitude, you'll realize that you are the most powerful